Late night walks have something fascinating. I always thought humans were meant to seek daylight, to rest when it gets late. But I've always preferred the night. Late at night, things slow down. People disappear. Spaces feel unfinished. And sometimes, when you're alone long enough, you notice things you wouldn't during the day. Tonight is about 5 of those moments. These are 5 experiences people have reported while walking alone late at night. Number 1. The woman looking up. I used to come home very late most nights because of my job. The city I lived in wasn't small, but it wasn't overwhelming either. Quite enough that routines formed quickly. On my way home, I almost always avoided the main road. There was a narrow side street that ran alongside it. It was dimmer and calmer. It always felt more peaceful, so I took it. Nothing unusual ever happened there. Until one night, as I turned onto that street, I noticed someone standing partway down. A woman, completely still. She wasn't on her phone. She wasn't looking around. She was staring straight up. Not slightly tilted. Fully leaning back. Her neck bent at an angle that looked uncomfortable to hold. Her mouth was open just a little. Her hair hung straight down. I slowed my pace, but I kept walking. This street had never given me a reason to be cautious before. When I reached her, the space felt tighter than usual. There wasn't much room to pass. I stopped beside her and looked at her face. She didn't react, didn't glance at me, didn't shift her weight. I asked if she was okay. Nothing. I followed her gaze upward, expecting to see whatever had caught her attention. There was nothing there, just empty sky. At that point, I wondered if something might be wrong. So I gently touched her shoulder. She jerked violently, like she'd been startled awake. She turned and stared at me, wide-eyed, as if she's only just realized I was there. I asked again if she was all right. She muttered an apology, didn't explain anything, then walked quickly past me, heading in the same direction I was going. I stayed where I was for a moment and lit a cigarette, letting her get ahead. I watched her until she reached the far end of the street. Then she stopped. She turned back toward the end, tilted her head upward again, and stood perfectly still. I finished the cigarette and watched the entire time. She never moved. After that, I took the main road for a while again. Number 2. The walk I don't remember. I'm the person I'm most uneasy around in this story. That evening, I was at home, cleaning my apartment. At some point, I checked when a nearby place closed. It was a short walk, a route I'd taken countless times. I remember having a drink, but I wasn't intoxicated. The plan was simple: get food, come back, go to sleep. That's where my memory stops. The next thing I knew, I was in the middle of the street, crossing toward the place. For a moment, nothing made sense. I reached into my pocket. No phone, no wallet. My keys weren't where they should have been. I always kept them in the same pocket. This time, they weren't there. I found them in my other hand. That's when I looked around. The intersection was empty. Usually it's busy. Now it was completely still. I turned around and started walking back home. First thing I noticed was how dark everything was. A large sign that was usually lit was off. So was another and another. I picked up my pace, listening for traffic. There wasn't any. Half a block from my building, someone passed me on a bike. Then he turned and circled back. I stopped walking. I didn't say anything. I just waited. After a few seconds, he rode away. I ran the rest of the way home. When I reached my door, it was locked, which didn't make sense. The lock was temperamental. I was usually the only one who could secure it properly. Inside, I searched for my phone and plugged it in. The screen stayed dark longer than it should have. When it finally turned on, it was early morning. I sat there for a long time, trying to piece it together. Somehow hours had passed. Something had shut off. Long enough for me to go through emotions I couldn't remember. I don't know where I was during that time. I only remember when I came back. Number 3. The couple on the sidewalk. It wasn't a walk. I usually run very early in the morning. The area where I live sits somewhere between quiet neighborhoods and open land. Long stretches of road. Very little movement at that hour. That morning, I had already been running for a while. When I saw them ahead of me on the sidewalk, 2 people. A man and a woman. They weren't walking, and they weren't talking. They were standing there, side by side, as if they were waiting for something. The clothing was the first thing that felt off. Carefully chosen, and expensive looking. Completely out of place for the time and location. The man stood there with his arms relaxed at his sides. His posture was straight, almost practiced. He wore dark sunglasses, even though it was still night. As I got closer, I noticed his face looked unusually bare. It took a moment to register why. He had no visible eyebrows. The woman stood slightly behind him, but her attention was fixed on me. She wasn't squinting against the darkness. She wasn't scanning her surroundings. She was staring directly at my face. Her expression didn't change as I approached. No curiosity. No reaction. Just a steady look that didn't blink. They didn't speak. They didn't acknowledge each other. And they didn't move. Without consciously deciding to, I crossed to the other side of the road and kept running. As I passed them, they turned. Not just their heads, their whole upper bodies. Both of them moved at the same time. The same speed. The same motion. Their expressions stayed exactly the same. The man's mouth curved slightly upward. The woman's lips held the same fixed shape. It felt deliberate, like I was being measured or evaluated. I didn't look back until they were far behind me. Later, I looked back along the same route. The sidewalk was empty. They were gone. I've run past plenty of strange things over the years. Animals, people who didn't belong, situations that felt unsafe. Nothing else has lingered the way that moment did. Number 4. The Man by the Tree. It wasn't really a walk. It was part of a longer trip. And it's still the most unsettling thing I've experienced outdoors. We had planned to camp for the night. But when we arrived, the area was already full. We'd been hiking all day, and there wasn't anywhere nearby where setting up a tent felt reasonable. On top of that, the weather was starting to turn. So we made the decision to leave the trail and call for a pickup. Someone met us at the nearest exit and drove us a few miles to another campsite we were familiar with. It was reachable by vehicle, but it was still deep enough in the wilderness that it felt isolated. We'd been there before, not often, but enough to recognize the area. When we got out of the vehicle, it was completely dark. No moon, no ambient light at all. It was cold. We were tired, and we were hungry. And we were quiet in the way people get when they've been moving all day and talking all day, and then they stop. That's when we noticed someone watching us. At first, it was just a shape, partially hidden behind a tree. No headlamp, no visible gear, no backpack. Just a person standing there. One of us called out, asking him to step into the light and explain what he was doing there. After a moment he did. When our lights hit him, I immediately noticed his shirt. It was white, or at least it used to be. There were dark smears across the fabric, not splattered, ragged. He looked rough. Long hair, a heavy beard, eyes that didn't settle on anything for long. What stood out the most was what he wasn't wearing. No jacket, no protective clothing, just a t-shirt and shorts despite the cold. We asked him what his situation was. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he told us we shouldn't be there. Someone from our group said we intended to camp anyway. He looked at us for a moment and said calmly, "I don't think that's a good idea for any of you." We turned away briefly to talk among ourselves. When we looked back, he was gone. No sound, no movement, just a tree again. None of us expected to sleep after that. We packed up immediately and decided to leave. As we pulled away, a red light appeared behind us. A flashlight with a filter. He was running. Not stumbling, not calling out. Just keeping pace longer than it made any sense. Eventually, we reached the main road and flagged down someone in uniform, explaining what had happened. They said they would look into it. For years, that was the end of it. I tried to rationalize the whole thing. I told myself he was probably protecting something nearby. A hunter, maybe. Someone who didn't want company. Then, years later, I saw his face again. Someone I was with pulled up an article on their phone. A photograph. I recognized him instantly. He had been arrested for a violent crime on a trail not far from where we had been. The timing didn't line up enough for certainty, but I've never been able to convince myself it was a coincidence. Number 5. Small dog, big dog. I was staying alone at the house for a few days, taking care of 2 dogs, while their owner was away. The area was quiet, somewhere between maintained homes and abandoned ones. Not isolated exactly, just far enough removed that people mostly kept to themselves. One of the dogs was large and intimidating. The other one, not so much. Because of their size difference, I walked them separately. I always took the smaller one first, then waited to walk the bigger dog later once it got darker. It felt safer that way. That evening, I was most of the way through the first walk when I had the sudden sense that someone was behind me. Not a sound, just that feeling. When I looked back, I saw a man standing near the edge of the road, close to an older, neglected house. He was wearing a hoodie, even though it was still warm out. I told myself I was overthinking it and kept walking. As the light faded, I checked again. He was still there. Every time I turned, so did he. Every time I changed pace, distance between us stayed the same. When I reached the road leading back to the house, I crossed just before a car passed, hoping that would slow him down. It didn't. I could hear his footsteps behind me on gravel now. The dog I was walking noticed him too and started reacting. It didn't stop. I went straight for the door, closed it behind us, and locked it. A moment later, someone tried the handle. Through the door, I heard a man's voice say that he liked my dog, asked if he could meet her. The way he said it didn't sound conversational. It sounded practiced. I told him to leave. He tried the handle again. By then, both dogs were barking. The larger one had moved up beside the door, growling in a way I hadn't heard before. The man repeated himself. Then he hit the door. That was when I opened it just enough for the larger dog to get forward. The reaction was immediate. The man stumbled back, swore, and ran uphill without looking back. I pulled the dog inside and locked the door again. Later, I called to report what had happened, but I couldn't describe the man well enough for it to go anywhere. Nothing else came of it. I stayed inside the rest of the night, sitting with both dogs, listening to the quiet. I still think about how certain he sounded when he spoke, like he already knew what he was going to say, and how quickly he changed his mind when he realized he had misjudged what was waiting behind that door.